All right, so today we're diving deep, and this time it's all about Kesser and Steen and their perspective on nature.
Oh, they're fascinating.
Right. I mean, from what we gather, they really seem to be zeroing in on how we humans, well, kind of mess things up with the environment.
I think it's safe to say their work is a bit of a wake-up call. They're pushing us to think about the long-term consequences of our actions, especially in areas like agriculture and how we handle waste.
Absolutely. And it seems like they're really advocating for natural solutions, those ecological processes that have, been doing their thing for millennia.
Absolutely. They're skeptical, and rightly so, I think, of these quick fixes, the reliance on technology or just throwing chemicals at every problem.
So basically, we're going to try and connect the dots between their ideas and what's actually happening out there in the real world.
Exactly. We'll cover everything from farming practices in the fishing industry to the political landscape and what's going on in our oceans.
And we'll do it all without getting lost in the weeds. No pun intended, of course.
Well, hopefully not. It's a complex web we're untangling here.
It is. But we'll break it down into bite-sized pieces, something for everyone to digest, whether they're experts or just starting to learn about these issues.
And hopefully, by the end of this deep dive, we'll all have a clearer picture of what Kesser and Steen are trying to tell us and how it relates to all of us.
And maybe even come away with some new insights. Okay, so one of the things that really struck me when reading up on Kesser and Steen was this example of, well, actually two young students.
Oh, you mean the ones who are experimenting with fermenting seaweed and eelgrass?
Yeah, those two. I mean, they talk about thinking outside the box. They're basically trying to create like a super fertilizer or even a spray for plants using nothing but, well, seaweed, eelgrass, and some good bacteria.
Lactic acid bacteria, to be precise. LE for short.
Right, LAB. And these bacteria, they're kind of like nature's little helpers. They produce acids that break down all those complex compounds in the seaweed and eelgrass, making it easier for plants to absorb all those good nutrients.
Like potassium, for example. It's essential for plant growth. And seaweed is packed with it. But it's often locked away in forms that plants struggle to access.
Exactly. And then there are all those trace minerals, the micronutrients that are just as important for healthy plants.
And what's really clever is that they even thought about adding a sugar source to the mix. It's like giving those lab a little boost, making the fermentation process even more efficient.
Right. It's like brewing a super nutrient-rich tea for your plants. But here's what really impressed me.
You mean their proposal to set up a control group?
Yeah. They want to compare plant growth and soil health in two scenarios, one with their fermented seaweed concoction and one without.
It's a scientific approach, taking what might seem like a homespun remedy and putting it to the test. I mean, that's thinking like Kesser and Steen, isn't it? Challenging assumptions and backing things up with data.
Absolutely. And, it really speaks to this larger idea that we see throughout their work, rethinking what we consider waste.
Oh, absolutely. Seeing it not as a problem to be disposed of, but as a resource, an opportunity.
It challenges that whole mindset of constantly buying new inputs, always needing something external.
Precisely. It aligns with the idea that nature is inherently resourceful, that it strives for balance. And if we can tap into that, we can create these closed-loop systems where everything gets reused, recycled, transformed.
And, it makes me think of Tante Green, this concept that's mentioned in some of the source material.
Oh, yes. Tante Green, or Aunt Green, if you will. She's like this embodiment of traditional sustainable wisdom.
Right. It's not necessarily about having all the fancy scientific knowledge, but it's that ingrained resourcefulness, that intuition about how to live in harmony with nature.
Exactly. And maybe Tante Grun has been onto something all along, even without all the fancy labs and experiments. Maybe we can learn a lot from those who came before us.
Absolutely. But here's a question that pops up when we think about scaling these sustainable practices. How do we move beyond individual gardens and homesteads? How do we create these green networks that span entire urban landscapes?
Oh, that's a fascinating concept. Imagine a city where balconies overflow with greenery, where allotments and communal gardens are connected by green corridors, where even rooftops are transformed into mini ecosystems.
It's a beautiful vision, isn't it? And it's not just about aesthetics. Think about the potential benefits for air quality, attracting pollinators, mitigating the urban heat island effect.
Absolutely. And there's also this social aspect, fostering a sense of community as people share plants, seeds, knowledge, and experience.
And it really emphasizes that point that Kesser and Steen keep making. Every little action counts. It's not just about grand gestures. It's about these small individual choices that collectively create a ripple effect.
Exactly. We all have a role to play in creating a more sustainable future. And speaking of roles, Kesser and Steen also touch on the different perceptions and challenges faced by farmers and fishers.
Oh, yes. They point to this idea that farmers often have a more, well, I guess you could say a more grounded understanding of what it takes to work with the land.
You mean they have a clearer grasp of the necessary processes?
Exactly. They know that you need healthy soil, the right nutrients, the right balance of microorganisms. It's all interconnected.
Whereas with fishing, it's often seen as this, well, almost like a battle against nature.
Right. It's like there's this constant focus on external threats, blaming seals, cormorants, or whatever else might be competing for the same resources.
Instead of addressing the underlying issues, like overfishing, mismanagement, and the impact of climate change on marine ecosystems.
And then, of course, you have the next generation of fishers coming in, inheriting this industry that's facing, well, let's be honest, some pretty serious challenges.
It's almost a symbolic handover, isn't it? A younger generation stepping into a world where the old certainties no longer hold true.
There's definitely a sense of contrast between the older fishers who've witnessed these changes firsthand and the younger generation who are coming in with perhaps a fresh perspective.
And maybe, just maybe, a renewed sense of hope, a belief that things can be done differently.
Which brings us back to this core theme in Kesser and Steen's work, the need for long-term sustainability and responsibility.
Oh, absolutely. It's about understanding that our actions today will have consequences that extend far beyond our own lifetimes.
It's about taking care of these resources, not just exploiting them for short-term gain. And, when we look at examples like the closure of that fish factory on Zealand.
Yes, a stark reminder of what happens when industries fail to adapt to changing realities.
It's a wake-up call, isn't it? A sign that we need to find more sustainable solutions, not just for the sake of the environment, but also for the people whose livelihoods depend on these industries.
It's about safeguarding both people and planet, ensuring that future generations have the same opportunities that we've had.
And, I really appreciate how Kesser and Steen use this analogy of a broken bicycle to describe the fishing industry. It's so apt.
Oh, it's brilliant, isn't it? It captures that frustration of being expected to keep pedaling, keep going, even though the bike is falling apart.
And it's not just about fixing the individual parts. It's about recognizing that the entire system needs an overhaul.
And what's even more frustrating is that often those outside the industry seem to think it's simply the fisher's problem to fix.
It's like, just pedal harder, you'll get there eventually. But it completely ignores the systemic issues, the regulatory burdens, the dwindling resources.
And sometimes it feels like the fishing industry is just seen as this, well, almost like a circus show, a form of entertainment.
Right. People want their fresh seafood, but they don't necessarily want to think about the complexities, the challenges, the human stories behind it.
And Kesser and Steen argue that what fishers need isn't to become circus performers, but to be given the resources and the support to create a truly sustainable future.
And, it's hard not to feel a sense of melancholy when you see those images of empty fishing cutters, those once proud vessels now rusting away, becoming tourist attractions rather than tools of the trade.
It's like they've become relics of a bygone era, almost like museum pieces.
And it makes you wonder, what will future generations make of them? Will they understand the stories they tell, the lives they represent?
And it speaks to a deeper question about the shifting economies in coastal communities. As fishing declines, tourism often takes its place.
Right, but it's a different kind of relationship with the sea, isn't it? It becomes about commodifying the past, selling an image of authenticity.
And it makes you wonder if these empty cutters, these silent witnesses to change, could somehow serve as a catalyst for a different kind of awakening.
An awakening to the importance of appreciating the resources we still have before they too become just a memory.
And speaking of memories, Kesser and Steen highlight this interesting phenomenon in their analysis, this sharing of stories about the good old days of fishing.
Oh yeah, those tales from Greenland, those memories of overflowing nets and seemingly endless bounty.
And it's often coupled with a certain skepticism towards environmental folks, those who are calling for greater restraint, for sustainability.
Right, because for those who remember a time of abundance, it can be hard to reconcile that with the current reality.
Especially if they've always viewed the ocean as this limitless resource capable of providing for all our needs.
It's a clash of perspectives, isn't it? And it makes me think about someone like Knud Rasmussen, the explorer. He had such a deep connection to the Arctic environment. Would he have shared that same view of the ocean as an inexhaustible resource? Or would he have recognized, even back then, that there were limits, that balance was essential?
The fascinating thought experiment, isn't it? And it speaks to this larger question about our enduring relationship with the sea, whether it's Knut Rasmussen venturing into the Arctic or a modern-day fisher casting their nets. There's this timeless connection.
Absolutely. And even though our technologies have changed, those fundamental ways of interacting with the ocean, of relying on its resources, haven't really changed all that much.
It's striking, isn't it? You look at those ancient Bronze Age fish hooks, and they're not all that different from what we use today. The basic principles are the same.
It shows you how deeply ingrained this relationship with the sea is in our human story. But Kesser and Steen point out that for those who have been fishing for generations, it can be difficult to fully grasp the extent of the changes that have occurred.
Yes, they might view it through a lens of nostalgia, of familiarity. It's just another cycle in a long history of interaction with the ocean.
And so it becomes about finding that balance, doesn't it, between respecting those traditions and adapting to the new realities, the new demands of sustainability.
And Kesser and Steen emphasize that while our tools and technologies may evolve, that fundamental relationship with the sea remains.
And, they bring in this really interesting analogy to illustrate this point, the comparison to a winery.
Oh, yes. It's a brilliant way to show how even seemingly modern industries often retain these ancient core practices.
You think about winemaking, and it's all high-tech these days, right? Stainless steel tanks, temperature control, all that.
But at its core, it's still about the grapes, the fermentation process, the delicate balance of flavors.
And even with all the technology, some winemakers are choosing to go back to basics, using traditional methods, even ancient ones.
Like the use of amphorae, those clay vessels that have been used for winemaking for thousands of years.
Exactly. And it's not just a gimmick. It's about recognizing that these old techniques can bring something unique to the table.
Biodynamic winemakers, for example, they swear by amphorae. They believe they allow the wine to breathe, to develop slowly, to express the true character of the grapes and the terroir.
It's about embracing those natural processes rather than trying to control them. And, this trend isn't limited to winemaking. We see it in agriculture and craft brewing in so many areas.
It's a shift in perspective, isn't it? A recognition that sometimes the old ways can be the best ways.
And it's especially interesting to see this among the younger generation. They're the ones who are really pushing for sustainability, for authenticity, for a deeper connection to the natural world.
They're challenging those old assumptions that bigger is always better, that uniformity is the ultimate goal.
They're looking for products that have character, that tell a story, that reflect the hands that made them.
And it's not just about aesthetics. It's about building businesses that are resilient, that are connected to the land, that have a purpose beyond just profit.
And it makes you think about what it would take for consumers to truly embrace this shift.
Because it's not just about the producers, is it? It's about all of us making different choices, supporting businesses that align with our values.
Right. And Kesser and Steen bring up this rather unsettling example that highlights this disconnect between convenience and responsibility. The case of people accepting free compost without really questioning where it comes from or how it was treated.
It's a bit alarming, isn't it? That willingness to take something just because it's free without considering the potential consequences.
And it's especially worrying when you think about the possibility of glyphosate contamination.
Oh, absolutely. It's like we're creating this hidden burden, allowing these harmful substances to seep into our environment without even realizing it.
And it speaks to a broader societal issue, doesn't it? This tendency to prioritize convenience over everything else.
And Kesser and Steen are pretty critical of policymakers for not doing more to address these issues.
They argue that alternatives exist, that we don't have to rely on these harmful chemicals.
But often it feels like the easy way out is chosen, the quick fix that kicks the can down the road.
It's like we're just moving the poison around, hoping it will magically disappear.
And one of the things Kesser and Steen highlight is the importance of understanding the science, the underlying processes, like the significance of pH levels in compost.
You mean how a high pH can actually inhibit microbial activity?
Exactly. And that's crucial because those microorganisms are what break down organic matter, what help create healthy soil.
So if those microbes aren't functioning properly, we're not really solving the problem, are we?
And what's even more concerning is the possibility of this rejected, contaminated compost ending up on farmers' fields.
And they might not even know what they're dealing with. They might think they're getting a valuable resource when in fact it could be introducing harmful substances into their land.
Kesser and Steen describe it as a form of chemical manipulation. It's like we're trying to cheat the system, and in the end, we're only cheating ourselves.
And it all comes back to this idea of responsibility. We all have a role to play in ensuring that we're not creating problems for future generations.
Absolutely. We need to be more aware of the impact of our choices, both as individuals and as a society.
So when we look at Kesser and Steen's work as a whole, what really stands out is their emphasis on long-term sustainable solutions.
They're advocating for working with nature, not against it. Harnessing those natural processes that have been operating for millennia.
Like their focus on using a lab for fermentation, it's a natural ecological way to break down waste and create valuable resources.
They're showing us that there are alternatives to the chemical-dependent approach.
And they're doing it in a way that's both scientifically sound and deeply respectful of the natural world.
And, it makes you wonder what they'll turn their attention to next. What other innovative nature-based solutions they'll come up with.
I'm definitely looking forward to their future work, and I'm sure there will be plenty of insightful observations and perhaps even some amusing anecdotes along the way.
Oh, absolutely. They have a knack for observing the world around them and drawing these unexpected connections.
It's like they're creating these thought experiments, these scenarios that make us question our assumptions.
Not in a scary way, but in a way that prompts us to think differently, to see the world through a new lens.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the key takeaway is this. We're all connected, whether we realize it or not. Our choices, our actions, they all have ripple effects.
And it's up to each of us to decide what kind of impact we want to have on the world around us.
So take a moment to reflect. What are your values? What kind of future do you want to create? And how can you align your actions with those aspirations? Thanks for joining us. All right, so today we're diving deep, and this time it's all about Kesser and Steen and their perspective on nature.
Oh, they're fascinating.